Hi everyone, in Algebra 3 today we are going to be going over the new material from lesson 64. And this lesson is going to seem pretty familiar because if you remember how to write something in rectangular form and something in polar form, it's actually going to be very similar to that. It's just changing the format. So what we're going to be doing is polar form of complex numbers and then the sums and products of complex numbers as well. So in lesson 64, just to touch back from something you already knew, rectangular form looks something like this when we were dealing with vectors. It had an I and the J or R and U, if you remember from Algebra 2. It would be 2 root 3 to the right and then 2 up or down. And that would be in quadrant 1 because they're both positive. And then polar form looked like this. So 4 and then there's an angle and 30 degrees. So what we're going to be dealing with now is going to be complex number format. And all that's going to change is going to be the symbols that are going to be used. So for rectangular form, for complex numbers, the number that does not have a letter attached to it is going to be your left and your right. And then the one with the I is going to be your up and your down. So I know that's confusing because before we were using I and J, but those actually had the little hats above it, which told us that we were in vector format. But now, just remember the number without a letter attached to it is going to be your left and your right, and then your I is going to be your up and your down. So this is complex number format. And then polar form, instead of this little angle marking, you are going to have the letters CIS. And what the CIS actually stands for is it actually can be expanded to be cosine of 30 plus I sine of 30. So CIS stands for cosine plus I sine of your angle. And that actually makes it a lot easier to convert from polar form into rectangular form. So rectangular form to polar form still going to work the same way. You're going to draw your picture in the correct quadrant, and then you're going to use inverse tangent to solve for the angle, and then you're going to use Pythagorean theorem to solve for the slant. So rectangular form to polar form is the same, and the only thing that's different is going to be instead of the angle marking, you're going to use CIS. And then when you're going from polar to rectangular, you're going to use this format. So it's 4 or your slant on the outside and then cosine of your angle plus I sine of your angle. After you solve for those, you would distribute the 4. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at number 8 from your lesson. So this is converting from rectangular form into polar form. So the first thing that we're going to do, again, so our 6 is determining our left and our right, and then our I is our up and our down. So since both of them are positive, I know that this is actually going to be in quadrant 1. So I'm going to start for number 8A. This is going to the right 6 and then up 2. So I'm going to draw a triangle, the right 6 up 2. Then I'm solving for my hypotenuse, and then I'm going to solve for my angle. So I said this is working exactly the same as we were before going from rectangular to polar. So we're going to use Pythagorean theorem to solve for your hypotenuse. So h squared equals 2 squared plus 6 squared. So 4 plus 36. That gives us 40. And then when we simplify it, 40 divided by 2 divided by 2. Okay. So 40 divided by 4 would be 2 root 10. So that means my hypotenuse is going to be 2 square root 10. And then I have to solve for the angle. And remember, so this is opposite, 2 is opposite, 6 is adjacent. So the trig function we're going to use is inverse tangent. So the inverse tangent of opposite, which is 2, over adjacent, which is 6. And if you forget how to enter that into the calculator, it's 2 divided by 6 equals, and then second tangent. And that would give me an angle of 18.43 degrees. So your answer, instead of using that angle marking, you're going to use this, which is going to be your slant, 2 root 10. CIS 18.43 degrees. So Pythagorean theorem to find the slant, inverse tangent to solve for the angle. And then the only thing that's different now is just changing the way you write your answer. Now moving on to part B. Part B is to convert this from this format, which is our polar format, into rectangular format, which would look like this. It says to use an exact answer, which means that because it's 30 degrees, we're going to have to use our reference triangle. So if you don't remember what CIS stands for part B, it's going to be 5, and when you expand it, it's cosine of 30 plus I sine of 30. So C cosine plus I sine of 30. And now what we're going to do is we're actually going to evaluate. So I'm going to use my reference triangle. I'm going to draw a reference triangle. This is my 30 degrees. So my adjacent is root 3, opposite is 1, hypotenuse is 2. So cosine of 32 would be root 3 over 2. And then for the sine of 30 would be 1/2. But don't forget your I. And then you're going to distribute your 5. So your answer will just be 5 root 3 over 2 plus 5 over 2 I. And that would be your result. So CIS stands for cosine plus I sine, and then all you're asked to do is to expand that. That completes number 8. Now we're going to look at the product of complex numbers. So if you were asked to do the product of these two complex numbers in polar format, the only thing you would need to do is you multiply the outside number, so you multiply the slants and then you add the degrees. So 5 times 6 would be 30. And then you add the degrees, which would be 62. Now normally, because this one can't use a reference triangle, that would be your end answer. But if you were able to convert this back into rectangular form, they most likely would want you to do that. So this one, again, multiply your outside, add your degrees. Now I want you to try this with number 9 on your lesson. So for number 9, it asks you to multiply 6 CIS 300 and 2 CIS 30. So I want you to try this on your own. Pause the video and try it, and then we're going to do it together. So for number 9, I'm going to multiply the outside numbers, which would give me 12. And then CIS 300 plus 30 would be 330 degrees. And we are going to need to expand this to write this into rectangular form. So when you expand it, remember CIS stands for cosine plus I sine. So this would be cosine of 330 plus I sine of 330. Now 330 degrees I know is in quadrant 4. So I'm going to draw a triangle in quadrant 4. 330 degrees means that this angle right here is going to be 30. My adjacent side is going to be root 3. My opposite is -1, and my hypotenuse is 2. Now what we're going to do is we're going to evaluate. So cosine of this triangle would be adjacent over hypotenuse. So my adjacent is going to be square root of 3 over 2. And then plus I sine. My sine is opposite over hypotenuse is going to be -1/2. But don't forget your I. And then, now that I've evaluated for cosine and sine of 330, now I'm going to distribute my 12, and that would simplify. So 12 times root 3 over 2 would simplify to 6 root 3. And then 12 divided by 2 would be 6. But it would be -6 because of that minus sign. And that would be your result. So it's not just multiplying the problem. It's also being able to convert this from polar form into rectangular form. So make sure that you guys are doing that. Now that we've done number 9, I want you to try number 10 on your own. So number 10, we have multiply 3 CIS 70 times 2 CIS 110. And then remember in the end to convert this from polar form to rectangular form. So for number 10, I'm going to multiply the two outside numbers, which would give me 6, and then I'm going to add the degrees. So 70 plus 110 gives me 180. I'm not going to end there. I actually need to expand this into rectangular form. So I remember that CIS stands for cosine of 180 plus I sine of 180. Now, 180 degrees is going to use the unit circle, and 180 degrees points to the left, and I know that that's -1, 0. And what I need to remember is that cosine is equal to the x coordinate and sine is equal to the y coordinate at 180 degrees. So the cosine at 180 degrees is going to be -1. And then the sine at 180 degrees is 0. So when I distribute my 6, all I end up with it is -6. Because it would be -6 plus 0i, and that would be your result. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the two newer problems from this lesson, or from lesson 63. So I want you guys to attempt numbers 11 and 12. And then when you're ready, you can come back and do them with me. So number 11, the first thing that I'm going to do, it says the equation x squared plus y squared minus 4x equals 0 is the equation of a circle. Complete the square to change the equation to standard form. Find the radius and the coordinates of the center of the circle and graph the circle. So the first thing that I'm going to do for number 11 is to put all the x's together. So x squared minus 4x, leave a space, plus y squared is equal to 0. Now, there's nothing attached, so this is kind of like 0y. So this is going to be, if I take half the term attached to x, that would be x minus 2 squared. When I square that, I get plus 4. Remember, what you do to one side of the equation, you do the opposite to the other side, so I'm going to add 4 to the other side. Now, attached to the y is 0, so that would be plus 0y, and half of 0 would just be 0. So I'd have y minus 0, essentially, and then you're adding 0 to both sides. And that's my final equation. Now, the coordinates of the center of the circle are going to be opposite of the ones that are in the equation. So in the equation is -2 and -0, but the opposite of -2 is 2, and the opposite of -0 would be 0. So the coordinate of the center of the circle is over 2 up 0. And now remember, the radius of your circle is going to be the square root of the right-hand side. So in this case, the radius is going to be equal to 2. Now you need to draw this diagram. So this is going to be over 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 2. So over 2, up 0. This is the center of my circle. My radius is 2, so in either direction I'm going to go 2. So over 2, up 2, left 2, and down 2. And that's all from the center of the circle. And then you just need to connect your dots to create some sort of circle. So my coordinate of my center of the circle is 2, 0, and then my radius is 2. And that would complete number 11. Now, if you didn't know how to do number 11, I want you to pause this video and I want you to attempt number 12 because it's very similar. So for number 12, I have the equation x squared plus y squared plus 6x minus 4y plus 9 equals 0 is the equation of a circle. Complete the square to change this equation into standard form. Find the radius and the coordinates of the center of the circle, then graph the circle. So for number 12, the first thing that I'm going to do is put all the x's in parentheses. So I have x squared plus 6x, leave a space, plus y squared minus 4y equals -9, because I have to move the 9 to the other side. Now you take half the term attached to x, so that would be plus 3, but then you square it. So that would be plus 9. And remember, whatever you do to the left-hand side, you do to the right. So I'm adding 9. Now I'm going to take half the term attached to y. So that would be y minus 2 and square it. Negative 2 squared is 4. So I add 4 to the left, add 4 to the right. Now the negative 9 and positive 9 are going to cancel. So I'm left with 4 on the right-hand side. Now the coordinate for the center of the circle, again, is the opposite of what's in the equation. So that would be negative 3 comma 2. My radius is just the square root of the right-hand side. So in this case, it's also 2. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to graph this. So I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to go negative 3 up 2 is going to be the coordinate of my center of my circle. My radius is 2. So from the center, you go to the right 2, you're going to go up 2, you're going to go down 2, and you're going to go to the left 2. And then you just need to connect your dots. Now the coordinate of my center of the circle was negative 3 comma 2, and my radius is 2. And that concludes your new material from this lesson. This lesson is lesson 64, and this is going to be stamped on Thursday. Hope you guys all have a great day. Bye.